Bhante and friends. I turned up at the Helsinki Buddhist Center in September 1976. I was 30 years old and in the process of separating from my English husband. Buddhadasa was in Finland. He was a lot younger looking, lots of black hair. And he was helping to run the Helsinki Center, which had been started by Vajrabodhi and Bodhi Sri just 3 years earlier. I had been doing transcendental meditation for 5 years, and I had met Bodhi Sri on a TM retreat. So now I came along to the Buddhist Center and I realized that I did much prefer the Buddhist meditation practices and the people. I really like the people. And I felt at home. It felt like my spiritual home. This is it. And I quickly became very involved. And in fact, my first experience of Dharma study was translating for Buddhadasa, who was doing talks in classes on the Eightfold Path. But in December, I was back in London. I was still living with my husband, but I went to the last lecture in the Sutra of Golden Light series that Bhante was doing. And I don't think I heard much of the lecture. I was so excited about seeing Bhante for the first time. And then I started going to classes at Pundarika, and that was the center in Balmoral Street that Buddhadasa was telling us about, and listening to Bhante's talks on tape, and helping Lokamitra to raise funds for Sukhavati. Of course, the LBC was just a building site at the time. I remember attending the 10th anniversary of the FWPO at East-West Center in April. And my memory of the movement then is that it seemed to me fairly well established and also very vigorously growing. There was lots of energy, idealism, genuine inspiration, as well as naive enthusiasm. It was very exciting to be part of an expanding group of radical optimists, I felt. We really believed in transforming the world as well as ourselves. We were constantly experimenting, breaking new ground, and this made us a little bit insecure, but we had tremendous faith. Faith in Bhante and the way he had made the Dharma so clear and practical and modern. I felt personally that almost anything was possible in this new life, despite the scarcity of material resources. Most of us were very poor, and it was traumatic supporting ourselves on the dole from time to time. But we were prepared to work hard on buildings, even short life housing, on ourselves, and for spreading the Dharma. Bhante was still around a lot personally, and that made a big difference. I think there was some projection going on, at least in me, but also a lot of learning and practicing what he was teaching and being inspired by. His energy was vast and electrifying. He gave lectures and seminars. He encouraged us to see him one-to-one. He wrote books and kept in touch with all the 5 centers. There were 5 centers at the time in Britain, and also with what was happening in Finland and in New Zealand. And Bhante, of course, did all the ordinations. And in those days, I could not imagine this being otherwise. It never occurred to me to think that this would have to change one day if the order was going to continue. Then I went to Finland for a year, and Bhante visited twice. He did my Mitra ceremony at the Helsinki Center in September 1977. I don't remember ever doing any Mitra study as such, but Bhante led study on Tiratna Vandana after the ceremony. And this was a privilege, of course. And I knew already that I wanted to commit myself, but I also felt very fearful. Sridevi was in Helsinki now, at that time, helping to run the center, and he was very encouraging, as were the Finnish order members. So I asked for ordination in March 1978. There was a wonderful summer retreat in Finland in June at a beautiful place in a big wooden house by a lake. And when I was doing some research for this talk, I found some old dakinis. This is the first women's magazine Anoma was editing at the time, just a newsletter really. But I found that in this issue, July 78, I had written a poem about that particular retreat. And I'd like to read you some of it because it will give you some sense of what retreats in Finland were like. It's called Finnish Landscape with a Buddha Figure. Solid ice-worn rock, hot in the blazing sun. An amazing wall rising from the cool emerald lake. Birches, rowan trees in blossom. Tall, resin-fragrant northern pines. In the high room, one wall is all window. A shrine. The Buddha smiles, surrounded by the trees and skies. Wild flowers at his feet. Dazzling light, energy and peace happen here in waves. A solitary morning swim, plunging in. My body awakens, it is a joy to stretch into quick strokes, facing the rising sun. 2 water birds come to greet me. Others are starting to utter their first song. A sauna bath in the evening, and different swimming. Crowded, naked friendliness with my new sisters. A tree pose on the lawn. I grow with all birches. A handstand against the tallest pine. I flow with him. A shoulder stand. I enter the endlessly fascinating drama of white clouds. This is the mandala, a sacred spot. We sit together, sometimes out of doors, facing each other. Flowers grow here and birds do fly. Here, understanding soars and emotions sing. So you may have spotted some influence of Sangharakshita in this poem. And you may have noticed also that communication exercises were a regular feature on retreats then. And sauna is still on the program on all Finnish retreats. I just went to Finland recently. I was there on retreat last weekend. And this time of year, you need to spend a few hours to make a hole in the ice if you want to dip in the lake. So that's on the work rota. But this time I particularly loved doing walking meditation on the frozen lake. It's beautiful, glittering, vast, clear space. So that's Finland in winter. But in July 1978, I was in London again. And the women in England had started a large community, Amaravati, and a country retreat centre, as well as the newsletter. I was very inspired, and now I'd sorted myself out with my husband, and I literally went forth from my married home in Leytonstone to live at Amaravati in Wanstead. I wanted to live the simple life, and I left behind just about all of my belongings. Later on, I did realize there was some literal-mindedness and maybe even a bit of guilt involved here behind this very idealistic asceticism of mine. The community life was intimate, intense, inspired, and very hard work on many levels. As Dhammadina described life at Amaravati in Dakini. I remember meeting Dhammadina, Sridevi, Anoma and others at Amaravati. But when I got ordained in August, they hardly knew me. Neither did the order members in Finland, as it all happened so fast, and I was involved in both countries. So this seems a bit odd to me now, and it did mean that life was rather tough later on. My ordination took place at Mandarva, the farm that was briefly the first women's retreat centre in Aslacton, outside Norwich. There was a 2-week open summer retreat, and at the end, Bhante came to do the ordinations. It was my first single-sex retreat, and one other woman, Vimala, was ordained with me. The private ordinations took place in a little chicken hut that Malini had decorated. Bhante gave me the Green Tara mantra, and he told me that my name also had a connection with Green Tara. I remember wishing that I could have been more receptive, but I also had the sense that something of great significance was happening. Next day, Bhante came again from Padmaloka. He did a question and answer session, and straight after that was the public ordination ceremony. And at that time, kesas still had golden Dharma chakras on them, rather than these 3 jewels. And we were still called upasikas and upasakas. There were 16 upasikas in the whole world, according to my research, 16 women order members, and 83 upasakas, or men order members. A few people did come specially to witness this public ordination, and there were 9 women order members present, which we thought was very impressive. There was no big fuss made about it. There were a few cards, but no photo sessions, no presents. I noticed last night, luckily there are some photos of some early ordinations, but on this occasion there weren't any. There was a cake that Marichi had made because that day was also Bhante's birthday. And my impression now is that ordination was then something that happened fairly quickly and naturally if you got actively involved. I loved my name, especially because of the connection with Sridevi. She was the only Devi at the time, and later became my Kalyana Mitra. I was very excited about our plan of living and working together in Bethnal Green after my ordination. I was to become secretary of the big, brand new London Buddhist Centre. but that is another story. Thank you. So we'll be moving on to the 80s, and Vimalabandhu will be telling us about what it was like getting ordained in the 80s. I don't really know Vimalabandhu, but he's given me some information to tell you. He was born in Indonesia, and he has lived and worked in 6 different countries, not just 2, but 6. He has known a wide range of kitchens in these places. Kitchens in the movement from Baja Retreat Centre in Maharashtra, India, to Earth Cafe in Manchester, from Buddha Field to Windhorse Evolution. And at the moment, he is in Cambridge working as a cook for Windhorse Evolution. And Vimalabandhu's talk has a title. It's called Croydon 1986, Padmaloka 1988, View from the Kitchen.